Hey everybody, welcome to the YouTube channel. My name is Tanner, and this is the Mended Mantle YouTube channel. Who I am, I'm just a student going through a psychology course right now. I am in college to become a counselor, and so right now I'm just in my freshman or sophomore year, I would say, of doing this. And so I am just trying to get through that schooling as a youth leader at one of our local churches here. And so I feel the burden to create this channel to help those who have legalism, who struggle with legalism, who struggle with resentment or shame and guilt or any kind of addiction, to kind of come out of that in biblical principles and helping us have a better connection to Jesus Christ. And so that is the main reason of this channel. And this video is just going to be an intro to who I am. And where I kind of came from. And it's just going to be my testimony of how God saved me, how I came to know Him, and some of the struggles that I had as well in my early walks of my life as a Christian. So the point of this testimony as well is not to shame anybody. That's not the point here. They're all great men and women of God that I know today and I have amazing relationships with. And so that's not the point of why I'm sharing this testimony. It's just to say where I've come from and where so many who are stuck in that cycle of shame and guilt are stuck in as well. And they're stuck in that kind of that past of their lives that they haven't come to grips with yet. And they've created this story of who they are, of shame and guilt that they've heaped on themselves because of their past. And so that's just to show that I've come from a spot that I understand how hard it is to get over things like that. And that we all come from a really hard spot sometimes. But the main point is just to understand that we can overcome this, and it's all through grace and mercy of Jesus Christ and having amazing relationships with those, coming to terms with those relationships, and understanding that there is more to life than just what our past was. So that's the main reason of this. Like I said, everybody that I'm talking about today in this video, they are all amazing people now who have amazing testimonies themselves, have gone through some heavy things and had some of their own struggles. So I love them all to death. They are amazing people. And so I'm going to go ahead and start from my childhood going all the way up until now, and why I really have a burden for this channel. So I grew up in a broken home. My mom, she struggled with alcoholism, and my brother, he struggled with his own addictions with drugs. And I was struggling with, at that time, with just self-esteem issues, of course. I was only about 8 years old when my mom started drinking, and it was until about 14. She was a single mother who went through a lot of, issues on her own, and was trying to work through those as well in a godly way, and didn't know how to handle that, right? As a single mom, that must have been really hard for her. And so a lot of nights it would leave me alone with either my brother, who was on drugs himself, or just by myself. And I would go and hang out with friends and things like that, but I didn't have a good steady home life. And that left me with a lot of self-esteem issues. It left me coping with things like depression or loneliness or anything else, maybe my self-esteem issues, in really unhealthy ways through my own addiction. And so all of that led me to a place of brokenness that I didn't realize I had from those years, those 8 years old to 14 years old. And it just really left our home feeling empty. A lot of the times my mom and my aunt would argue and things like that, and we'd have to witness that as family. And it was really hard on them. I know it was, because they were both single mothers trying to go through some things. And so me growing up at about 14, I decided I wanted to move over to my dad's house, where I had never really known my dad from that time. Before I was 8 years old, he did come and pick me up for the summer times and things like that, but I never really spoke to him other than that. It was just my way of getting out of the situation that I was in. And so I called him up one day and talked to him, and he said, of course, I could move out with him. So at 14 years of age, I did go and move with him, where my mom still struggled with alcoholism. My brother was still in his battle with drugs and things like that. He was kind of diving into also a little bit of like a sorcery level, and I'll leave that for his testimony. But it was just like I said, a broken home, right, that I moved out of, and I moved to my dad's house, where it was very structured at my dad's house. It was very structured in a way where if I didn't get good grades, I'd get in trouble. If I didn't do my chores, I would get in trouble. So it came from this place of not having any structure to complete structure. And it was such a whirlwind for me of emotions at that time. I did get into a little bit of trouble there as well, which gave me a record at the time. And so I did have a criminal record at that time that would disappear when I turned 18. And I kind of walked through that life with my dad until I was about 15 or 16. I lived with my dad. And we lived in this small town outside of Corpus Christi where, it was a very small town. Everybody kind of knew each other. They knew each other's stories and things like that. They knew what was going on, very small town. But I moved out of there at about 16 back with my mom, who was doing amazing. She was, overcoming her addiction. She was also getting back on her feet as well. So we lived with my grandmother at the time when I moved back with my mom at 16. And after about a month of living there, it was me, my grandmother, my brother, and his girlfriend at the time. And so we all lived with each other. And about a month after living there, something tragic had happened. My grandmother had been killed in a terrible, tragic situation. And the people involved in the investigation were my brother and my girlfriend, where my brother is currently incarcerated for the crime. And so my grandmother was murdered that day, and this sent me and my family in a long spiral downward, right? Of course, this would do that to anybody who, something so tragic has happened between family members, between something you'd never expect, right? And it was a really hard time. For about 8 years or so, 6 years or so, I was going through this turmoil in my heart and in my mind where I'd never really come to grips with what had happened that night. And I thought that I didn't hold any resentment towards my brother. I thought I didn't hold any resentment towards who he was as a person, but I did. I held a lot of resentment, and I didn't even realize it. I carried this weight of burden, and I felt guilty myself for that situation in that moment in my life. And the reason I felt guilty is because the day that everything happened, as a kid, I didn't realize that it would be my last time to see my grandmother. But I remember walking to the door and I just shouted inside, "Hey, Nana, love you, see you later." And that was it. I didn't go and I didn't hug her. I didn't give her a kiss. I didn't tell her how much I loved her or anything like that. I just left it at that. And for a long time, I carried this shame and this guilt of thinking that I was a bad person for that. But looking back, I had to remind myself, Tanner, you were only 16 at the time. You didn't know that was going to be your last time to see your grandmother. You didn't know that was going to be the last words you ever spoke to her. And so that was a really hard thing for me to overcome there. And that was where I carried a lot of my burden and a lot of my shame and a lot of my guilt of who I was as a person. And not just as a person, but as a Christian. For a lot of my Christian life, I had that shame that I carried. And so after that day, when I was 16, we moved out. Me and my mother, we moved into this apartment complex where me and her relationship just went downhill with each other. I was a really rebellious teenager. I was going through a lot. She was going through a lot. We argued a lot. And so it was a really tough situation that we were going through. And I would go out and I would drink with my friend, and we would smoke sometimes together, and we would just hang out. And eventually I ended up moving out of my mom's house to move in with this friend. And I got involved in a lot of things I shouldn't have. I listened to rap music all the time, which I now realize how powerful that is. But yeah, I got involved with rap music, which was really detrimental to who I was as a person. I didn't realize it at the time. But I would listen to an artist that would praise other gods in his music. He would speak about Allah, and it was so spiritual, and I didn't know how spiritual it was. So for a period of about 2 or 3 years, I lived with this individual until I was about 18 or 19, I want to say. And in this time, me and my mom, we didn't have a good relationship. We didn't really talk with each other. I hated God. I hated anything to do with God because I always had the thought on my mind, if God is a good God, why would he allow something like this to happen? Why would he let my grandmother be killed and my brother be a suspect in this, right? Why would a good God let something like that happen? And I didn't understand that at the time in my mind, and that was a question I grappled with, and I wrestled with it constantly. And so it led me to this place of anytime my mom would bring up God, I would just absolutely ridicule her for it. I would make her feel dumb for it. And she would have a really hard time ministering the gospel to me, but in the background, she kept praying over and over and over again for my salvation and my brother's salvation. And I remember one night, me and my friend, we were just drinking and having a good time and things like that. And that was my life constantly. And I remember one time I went and I hung out with one of my brother's old friends, whose name I won't say, but he had pretty much it was a e-cigarette for marijuana. And I remember taking a couple of puffs off of it. It was one puff I took off of it, and it was absolutely laced with something. I don't know what it was. I still to this day don't remember, but I remember hearing these screams in my head as I took a hit off of this thing. And the whole night I was out of it, blacking in and out of consciousness, and I could hear this screaming all around me. It sounded like someone had drugged me down to the pits of hell, and I could hear this screaming. And I remember waking up at about 4 a.m. and I was on this guy's couch. I couldn't drive. It was awful. I couldn't drive. And he told me I had to go. He told me I had to go that night. I had to leave his house, and I was still out of it, blacking out. And I got in the car to drive, and I just remember blacking in and out of consciousness on the way home as well. And there was one point in the ride that it stuck with me. I remember it. I never forgot it. I remember driving towards the barrier lane on a highway. And before I hit it, I blacked out. And I woke up pulling into my apartment complex, completely safe, no damage on my car. And I pulled into a parking spot, and I still had to go to work that day. And that, whatever that was in that, had messed me up for days afterwards. And this was a time when God was slowly starting to call me back to himself, and I didn't realize it. I was a very violent person as well. So anytime someone would say something wrong to me, I would want to fight them. I would want to just take it out immediately and handle the situation right then and there. Well, one night, this was the night God really called me. One night, I remember I was listening to this individual who would rap his music, and he would sing to other gods, and I didn't think anything of it because I didn't really believe in God. I knew the name of Jesus. I didn't know who Jesus was. I had heard that he died on the cross for us, right? And but other than that, I didn't really believe the story. I remember going to bed, and I slept on the couch at that time in my friend's house, in his apartment, with his parents. And I would sleep on the couch. They had a recliner sofa that I would sleep on. And I remember I went to sleep listening to his music. Well, in the middle of the night, I was rolled over, right? And my back was towards the middle of the living room. And when I was there in the middle of the living room, I remember waking up, and I felt this really evil presence staring at me. And I didn't know what it was, but I felt it staring at me. I just could feel its presence. And as I turned around to go and look at whatever it was in the middle of the living room staring at me, my body started convulsing. As I hit my back, I started convulsing. And I just remember my mind going very dark. It was like these walls coming in on my mind and closing it, right? And I just remember knowing in my heart at that time, something is trying to take over my mind. And I heard the slightest words tell me, say Jesus. And I'm sitting there, I don't believe in Jesus, yet something just told me, say Jesus. I try and whisper it, and I can't whisper it at all. And a lot of people have sleep paralysis. This was not sleep paralysis. This was something much, much more spiritual. And it was something much more serious. And I just remember the curtains on my mind going darker and darker. And I hear it again, say Jesus. And I try and I can't say it. And then at this point, it feels like minutes have gone by. It feels like I've been here an eternity of fighting this thing, trying not to let it take over my mind. And at this point, I'm looking through pin straws of light. And everything around me is hazy, right? But imagine just pin straws, and you have pin straws that you're looking through. And that was what I was seeing at this point, knowing whatever it was about to take over my mind in this moment. And I just hear it again one last time, say Jesus. And I barely whisper and utter Jesus. And the whole room goes still. It goes silent. My body stops moving. My vision comes back. My clarity of my mind comes back. And I just remember still feeling that eerie presence in the room with me. Immediately, I call my mom, who we don't have a good relationship, but I tell her what just happened. And she prays with me on the phone right then and there. And I remember night after night, I had the same dream that God gave me. It was the same dream over and over and over again. It was, the room was dark, and I could see the congregation before me, but I would be preaching the gospel to multitudes of people. And that dream happened to me night after night after night. And I remember calling my mom and my aunt about it, telling them about it, what this dream was. And they had been praying for me in the background. I didn't know they had been praying for me, but they were praying for me. And so I got involved in church at that point. I started going to church a little bit here and there. And of course, just like the enemy does, I got involved in church, and I got a really good job opportunity that didn't allow me to go to church. So I got out of church after I was baptized, and I got into the oil field and kind of started slipping back into my old ways. And that's where I met my then wife, was in the oil field. And she is actually the biggest reason that I decided to find a job back inside of the, I started to find a job back inside of my hometown, right, of Houston. And so I found a job back in Houston. I was able to start going to church again. I started going to church, and me and my wife, we were dating at the time. And it was just such a God thing in the way we met. I'll talk about that at a later time. But it was such a God thing of how we met. And she's been such an amazing help to me. And so I started going back to church. And I had this bold faith, right? But I had so many misunderstandings about who God was. I thought that God only wanted to use me and not to heal me. I thought that God only wanted me for a ministry, when really He wanted this amazing relationship with me and this amazing healing that He wanted to do inwardly on who I was as a person, and the shame that I had created for myself He wanted to heal. And so I had this job, and the whole time I have this job, I'm this broken individual who's trying to preach the gospel to others as well. But the version of Jesus that I have, I'm also laying on top of them, right? This version who sees Jesus as just this holy God, which He is. But I saw Him as so holy that He only wanted to use us for purposes and not allow us to have this real deep relationship, this intimate relationship. And He wanted to clear the shame and the guilt out of my life. And I didn't realize that at the time. I knew He loved me. I knew that He was there for me if I called on His name, but I didn't realize the extent that that went to. And so in my own time, I ended up hurting a lot of people because I myself didn't fully understand who Jesus Christ was and how much He loved us. And so it took a lot of growth for me to understand who He was. And a lot of years, it took many years for me to understand how much God really loves us and how much He truly wants to not only use us for a ministry, but He desires our healing. He desires our growth as a father does desire the growth of his daughter or his son, right? And so I had this kind of lens of shame attached to God where if I messed up or I made a mistake, I couldn't go back to Him, right? And I would teach that to others. You can go back to God, but I myself wouldn't be able to do it because I had such a guilt and a shame. And so that was one of my biggest mistakes, and people can understand that when you have that, right? People will understand if I really live out what I say, or if I really live out the love that I preach to them. They'll understand it by my actions and my words, and that fruit will manifest to them. And I didn't realize that at the time. And so a lot of people in the warehouse that I worked with at the time, I ministered to, but I look back and I don't know how well I ministered to them because I myself was a broken individual who God was still working on. And I did my best at the moment, and I keep in touch with a lot of them today, but God had to work a lot of things out of me, a lot of that shame and a lot of that guilt. And as I was going through my own addiction, as I was going through my own things that I put my wife through, right? And so now I'm in a place where God has broken me down in so many ways to be able to see how much He loves me, how much He loves you, how much He loves us as our Father. And He really does care for us. And I remember one time at the deepest, darkest part of my Christian walk, I was really going through an addiction that I was fighting with. And I remember I was just looking for purpose. What was my ministry actually going to be? And I remember going to church one night, and me and my wife were driving in the car, and there was this van I had never seen parked in this shopping strip before, but on it, it had pictures of Jesus, you know, how they have the thorns in His head and things like that, and it had bold red letters of Hebrew 13:3, which was, remember the prisoners as if you were prisoners with them. And at that moment, I knew my ministry is going to be helping others out of addiction, out of shame, and out of guilt, as if I am still a prisoner with them. And so this whole channel is going to be inspired around teaching us who God is, how much He loves us, how much He wants to pull us out of our addictions, our shame, and our guilt, and that there is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus, because He loves us, and we are special in His eyes. we are something so special and treasured to Jesus that we can't even comprehend it. And I don't think we'll ever fully comprehend it on this earth. I think we'll only truly know the depths of it when we stand before him one day and we see how much he loves us and we feel his love poured out. So that's my testimony of how God brought me to him. Not that I'm a perfect individual now. I still have so many flaws that God is working on me in, and I'm so thankful that he's so merciful and patient with me. But as we walk through this journey together, as I'm able to help somebody, I pray that this would be just a opportunity for God to minister to you and for you to accept his love and his grace and his mercy in a way that you haven't seen before. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments, or subscribe and follow along with me as I teach some of these things. And we're going to be going over things like legalism. We're going to be going over things like spiritual OCD. We're going to be going over things like shame and guilt and addiction and talking about all of these things. And so it's going to be such a powerful journey. We're going to be talking about connection with others and with God. And so it's just going to be a powerful time. It's going to be a really powerful time. I just briefly went over my testimony today. There's so much more to it that God has brought me through, and the testimonies that I've seen of just his provision and his blessings on my wife and myself. And so, again, all the people that I've talked about in my testimony today that used to struggle with something are now walking in a walk with God that is so rich and it's so deep. And I'm so thankful for them because they teach me constantly in our conversations that we have with each other. And me and my brother have such an amazing relationship now. And God healed so much in that resentment that I had there. God healed so much in the unforgiveness that I was holding there. And he's done a lot of that through my music that I've sang out. And I'm just so grateful for the relationships that I have with each of these people today. And it's why it's so important that we show grace and mercy in everything we do, because we never know what people are going through. And we show grace and mercy to ourselves as well, because we're all going through a lot. And we have to remember to be gentle with ourselves first and foremost, because we have to be able to pour from a cup that is full. And we can only do that by accepting the grace and mercy that Jesus Christ fills us up with. So once again, welcome to the Mended Mantle YouTube channel. My name is Tanner. I love you guys. I pray for you, each of you. If you reach out to me with prayer requests, I will be praying for those as well. There's a lot of things that I want to do with this channel, a lot of healing I want to happen with this channel. So go in the grace and mercy of Jesus Christ. Understand how much you are loved and needed, and you are desired by Jesus Christ. And I love you each, and I pray for each and every one of you. In Jesus' name, see you guys.